Hello, and welcome back to Think Yourself Healthy podcast. I'm your host, Heather Barbieri. Before we dive into this episode, I just want to remind you that if you take a screenshot that you're listening and tag us on Instagram, we'll send you a 15% off discount for the 8-week Retrain Your Brain program. Just take a screenshot and tag me at Heather Barbieri RDN. Thanks for listening, and let's get right to it. Hello, everybody. On today's episode of Think Yourself Healthy, we have special guest Pamela Garfield-Jaeger, the Truthful Therapist. Pamela, I am so excited for you to be here today with us. Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat.
Thank you for having me. This sounds like it's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, I wouldn't lie if I didn't say I wasn't a little bit nervous as I hit that send email to you about proposing this conversation today. But, I feel that this is something significant that we do have to raise awareness around and start having some more challenging conversations. In my opinion, right now, the whole world is so damn sensitive that we've really lost our footing in terms of feeling confident with being able to express ourselves without fear of offending another or having some sort of really significant backlash like, cancel culture, to name a few. But I know for myself, this is something that we're going to talk about today that I personally have a lot of experience with in the mental health and substance abuse recovery world. And this is something that, I'm exposed to on a daily basis. It's something that I'm definitely having challenges around navigating and figuring out where the footing is that is okay. So I'm sure the audience is really curious, like, what are they going to talk about? So Pamela, introduce yourself a little. Tell us a little bit about you and kind of what qualifies you to talk about this subject before we dive right in.
Yeah, so I'm unusual, I think, because I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm very much challenging the narrative right now on a lot of topics. I have over 20 years of experience. I actually got my degree at NYU in the late 90s, and I've worked in a variety of settings, and I've worked with a lot of vulnerable populations, including in group homes, in programs for people with severe mental illness, mostly young adults or teenagers, and I've also done a lot of work in schools as both the direct work as a social worker and also as a clinical supervisor, where I was supervising up-and-coming therapists, people working on getting their license for several years, both in New York and in California.
Okay. Wow. That's a pretty broad experience. Definitely, kind of introduces you to all of it. And California and New York, they always seem to be on the same page, right?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been in New York since I think things have gotten a little more radical here in California as things have gotten more and more radical. But from what I hear from friends and family, that it's similar over there.
Mm-hmm. So today, one of the things that I would really like to chat about, and for some, they might perceive it as challenging. But what I'd really like to do is kind of open up a conversation around the narrative and agenda that is occurring mainstream with this whole transgender identity. So kind of, let's take it from there. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, to me, it's wild. So I have an unusual story. I don't know if you're familiar with it. So the reason I think I have this perspective maybe a little more clearer than other people in my field who have kind of just been in it gradually is I actually got knocked out of my profession due to a physical reason. I actually went on disability at the end of 2016, early 2017. And I think that's when all of this gender ideology, I think it was under the surface, but that's when it really ramped up. And that's when it started to become more mainstream. And that's when they started to do more of this affirmative therapy stuff. And they started using pronouns more mainstream and really pushing it on children. And it was just more, and there was a lot of cancel culture happening at that time, which I wasn't aware of. So I think people were speaking up about it, not okay with it, but those that were, I think, were being weeded out. So I think that's where we've landed where we are today.
Yeah.
But so I was out of the profession while things were ramping up. And then I came back at only part-time because I actually still have chronic pain and I still get some disability. Sorry. I'm okay, but I just can't work a full-time job. That's partly why I'm able to speak out here. That's one of the reasons that's emboldened me. I realized I was sort of called to this because I'm in this position. So I was working part-time at an IOP PHP program. That's a program for people who are usually transitioning from being hospitalized, coming through basically doing group therapy. They usually have some kind of mental health issues, pretty severe one that probably led them to a suicide attempt or some other serious mental health issue. And I was working with a substance abuse track, the adult track, and the teen track. I was sort of afloat. Okay. And there, when I was working with the teens, which they put me with the most because, one, that's where they needed the most help, and two, that's where I was good at. And a lot of the therapists didn't want to work with the teens, and I enjoyed it and have that skill. I just saw such a contrast, and I saw this wild difference from when I left just a few years before, that so many kids were identifying as trans. Most of them were non-binary at the time. This was during 2021. And the wild part to me was how my colleagues weren't addressing any of the issues that were super obvious to me, like trauma, or just avoiding issues that were a struggle for them, or using it as a kind of leverage to get what they want instead of addressing what's happening for them, the pain that they had, things like that. And it was just all very shocking. And because I chose not to go along with the California state mandate, the thing. I don't know if I don't want to get you taken off.
No, we've already got flags, I'm sure.
I went through all that medical stuff, and I had the natural antibody, so I chose not to get the thing. And so I was very upset. I was displaced once again, but then I realized this emboldened me to start talking about what I saw and how shocking this was for me as someone who's been in the field for so many years, working with teenagers, working with, people who have lots of trauma and all kinds of vulnerable issues, and none of that being addressed when the topic of gender came up. It was just really shocking.
No, I think that you're so on point here with this and where we're going to take this conversation, because I work in the same demographic and I'm seeing the same things happening over and over. And it's becoming this really crazy space where it's almost like no one's allowed to say anything that goes against the narrative and the agenda to support this transgender identity movement that is happening. And, with these individuals, like you mentioned, why aren't we first brushing the surface of trauma and the vulnerability that these children have been put in that have created some confusion, and, they're just desperately seeking an inclusion of some sort. That's my opinion.
So, yeah, definitely.
What are your thoughts? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of components, and obviously there's different situations and different scenarios, but one of the themes definitely is looking for a sense of belonging. There's especially teenagers are looking for that in general. All teenagers are. And then you're talking about vulnerable teenagers who are feeling lost and alone and struggling, a complete fractured sense of self. Some of them have other mental health issues, whether it might be maybe more organic or maybe something, trauma or issues within their families, whatever the case may be, but they're struggling with something. And then they latch on to the gender stuff because they get they call it love bombed. They get this whole community and they get all these flags, and they get, even in the program, it was very interesting to observe that even the kids that weren't trans identifying, in a way, they got something out of it because it made them feel good to tell the trans kids that they were accepted and all this stuff. So it was this way for the kids to interact, this very superficial way for them to feel accepted or feel like they were doing the right thing when they were completely floundering on figuring out how to be in society.
Right. So what I'm hearing is there's some aspects of this that do have benefit and are healthy. However, maybe this isn't the route to go about achieving that health and wellness.
Yeah, I think so.
Right?
I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think it's the right route. I mean, it gives some short-term benefits. It does make someone feel usually accepted. There is a really positive feeling to feel like you're accepted or you're a part of something, especially when you feel outcasted for some reason or another. Mm-hmm. And like I was so I was in this film Disconnected.
Okay.
And I was at this rally. This was in October of last year, October 2022. And I was spending some time with a detransitioner, which, for those that don't know, that's somebody who identified as trans. This was a woman who identified as trans for several years, most throughout her adolescence and young adult life. She's now about 22. Mm-hmm. And she realized that she is not trans. She basically desisted from it. Mm-hmm. And we were standing next to a group of the pro-trans people, and they were like dancing around, and they had the colorful flags, and they were playing music, and we were kind of standing quietly, kind of being boring. Yeah. And we were talking about how, like, she was saying, and I was saying it too, like, yeah, no wonder, like, look how fun they are, look how it's enticing. I mean, and she was like, she said that was one of the reasons, one of the things that really drew her to them was she felt like she really belonged, both in person and online. So there's the whole online life, but even in person, she had a new set of friends. She had a bunch of trans friends, and it really gave her something that she didn't feel she had. And so it makes sense to want to gravitate towards that if you're really feel alone, or if you're a human being, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Well, I can say that in my personal experience professionally, working in the state of California in mental health wellness, that over the last year, the amount of individuals that are coming in with diagnoses of transgender, transitioning, taking hormone medications, all of these things, I said to a friend of mine recently, I said, I could start a nutrition practice that focused specifically on individuals who were wanting to transition, because a lot of what's happening in our food system in mainstream is truly working against their ability to actually make a successful transition in a timely manner. A lot of the foods that we're eating are actually contradicting some of these hormonal medications that they're on. And anyway, but that's not
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so it's interesting because I'm like, okay, I'm seeing more and more of this occur, and there's, we have to take this into consideration, the hormone treatment and all of the things that they're doing. But I'm seeing the prevalence of these diagnoses or identifications occurring. It's like exponential.
It's crazy.
It's exponential. And so this has created a lot of tiptoeing and uncertainty for me as a professional. I have been attacked. I am a health and wellness educator. So one of the things that, I talk about are the female cycle. And I have been told I'm no longer allowed to use that word. I'm not allowed to, and it's just getting really confusing when you're sitting in a group full of biologically female individuals and addressing the hormonal components that come along with those biological factors. And then individuals saying, you can't say those words. You can't say female. You can't say woman. And I'm like, I don't know how to teach. I'm not sure how to educate on this, And so it's created a lot of confusion for me, which has really brought a lot of concern. Where is this going? Where are we headed? What are we looking at in the very near future with how exponential this movement has occurred in such a short time? So where do we go as a society if we don't start having these kind of conversations and bring awareness? And real quick, the reason I ask is because I don't feel safe in my profession having conversations with other clinicians and professionals because of being politically correct and all of those things. It's like, I don't know where to go for that support and how to navigate through this.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I got to be honest, I have it easy now because I got out. But it was tough because I remember not knowing what to do when we were in the private room introducing a new child, and the first introduction was, what are their pronouns? And usually it was a girl. It always was a girl in this case. And it was often the pronoun was they, them, or sometimes like they, he, or something. And even I went along with it because I was new and I was only part-time, and I wasn't sure. I was uncomfortable. So, I mean, everyone's like, yeah, just be bold, just speak up. And I think if I were there now, I would be, because I've also learned a lot more about the harms of this and really, really understand it more. But at the time I knew it was wrong. I just didn't understand how wrong.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. So
it's tough. Yeah,
it is. And unfortunately, a lot of the 3-letter agencies that our government has in place to help society, to help those in need.
Help.
Can we talk about that?
For those who are just listening, those were air quotes.
Yes, air quotes for help. In my opinion, there's many of these institutions that have a very biased, opinion and approach that is just being shoved down everyone's throat and creating a lot of confusion, especially for parents. And I say that because you reside in California now?
I do. I am in the Bay Area of California.
Okay.
I'm in the belly of the beast here.
So then that this week, legally, it went into effect that parents no longer can deny their children of any kind of medical intervention when it comes to the transitioning.
Wait, are you talking about? Oh, that's not the SB 107, the one where we're now a trans sanctuary state. That's a different one.
I was it 106 maybe is what I was referring to.
Okay.
SB 106. I don't know if I know which one 107 is.
Oh, that's another one.
Okay.
So we're now a trans sanctuary state. So basically people can come from other states and get trans medicine, and kids can do it without their parents' permission, and they'll become a ward of California state. The other one that's crazy here is there's a bill where, and this is where I think what you're describing earlier, and it's coming down from legislation, is there's a bill where all of the medical professionals are being forced to being trained on affirmative care, and they have to follow through with it. Otherwise they go back to training. So even like the janitors are getting this. So obviously this is a waste of resources, but also it's really being pushed from the top down that professionals have to do this affirmative thing, use the chosen name and pronouns. I'm not sure what the specific consequences are yet, but I mean, cancel culture is what comes to mind instantly.
Man, I had no idea of this. This is very enlightening. Thank you for sharing this information with me, because I didn't realize that I didn't have any idea of that 107. Wow.
And then I don't know if you know this too, since 2011, it's actually been legal for a child to go to a therapist without their parents' permission.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's been a long time coming in California. That's been there for a while.
Wow.
One Arnold Schwarzenegger was our governor.
Oh, wow.
I'm kind of awake to this now, but at the time, little naive me was like, well, that's good because I'm nice. And kids that need help will get it, the little naive perspective. But now I see it as they've been working on stripping parental rights away for a really long time. And
so
it's scary.
Yeah, it's frightening. And I'm so grateful that my children are 26 and almost 22. And this is not something that I'm having to personally have to navigate through, with my own children. But for all of those parents who are listening, whom they maybe aren't directly being impacted by this right now, but at some point, there is a very high likeliness that they will be. How does this parent navigate this shade of gray, this whole crazy agenda?
I got to say, so I'll just be blunt. I'm actually not a parent.
Okay.
I've worked with kids for so long, and this is really I feel really passionate about this because I just feel like a whole part of what I've done through my life and I guess almost my identity, or I don't know what you want to call it, my purpose was to help kids and help them be mentally well. And I'm watching society just completely undo everything that I thought I was doing to help people. But yeah, it's a tricky thing. I don't envy parents. I also, just a little story. Yesterday, I was out at Davis, California. There is lives a TikTok just did a story on this where they're actively transing kids behind parents' backs, where they're training the school counselors to affirm children without the parents' permission, without telling parents, basically giving the new pronouns, the names, that sort of thing. And they had a workshop. They were going to have an in-person workshop with this woman, I believe her name is Rachel Pepper, who has been at this for a long time. And because a lot of people, there was some backlash, they actually cowarded and they changed the program to be Zoom. And so that's sort of a win. But a group of parents actually went there yesterday. We all stood out in the rain. It's been pouring rain here in California. And we stood out there in front of the school with these big signs that said, like, transitioning is not suicide prevention, because that is a lie, and lots of other signs of that nature. And some of the kids, the teenagers, were coming up to us. I mean, obviously the ones that have been indoctrinated were telling us we were bigots, telling us that, you know, we don't care about them. And they were spewing all this hate at us. And I mean, instead of being angry, I wasn't angry. They're children. I honestly, it got to me. I got a little teary. And watching how these kids, in my opinion, have just been brainwashed to not realize. I actually said to the one girl who was being pretty antagonistic, I just said, we're just here because we care about you. We actually really care. That's really why we're here. She's like, you don't care. And I don't know what her parents are like or what they believe. I know a lot of parents don't agree with this. Even left-leaning Democrat parents, they don't agree with this, but they don't know what to do because they're scared. There's a lot of fearful parents who don't want to speak up to be called a bigot. Yeah.
So fear is ultimately what's moving this whole narrative and agenda and push towards this, is that we've all been backed into a corner and fear-mongered out of being politically correct and not being offensive, not wanting to be canceled by culture, all of the things. So we just, nobody says anything.
That's it. And more people are speaking up. I mean, we were out there yesterday, and at the same time, there was a group of people out in Washington, D.C. with signs, some prominent people that have been fighting this. So more people are speaking up, more detransitioners, the people who used to be trans are now speaking up. They used to be heavily silenced. I mean, they still are, but they're now learning to ignore that.
Well, that's a whole nother part of this problem that we have to take into consideration, is the censorship and the lack of availability of freedom of speech and people being able to speak about their personal experience, to share raise awareness for others that maybe this isn't the right direction right now. So it makes it that much harder, or ever, right? I mean, at least right now.
At least when you're at this age, you really can't know. I mean, most people regret the tattoos they got when they were young. So let's, be real about this. Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about, what even gets a child to the point where they're even potentially considering these things. Like, what is a child going through and exposed to that's putting them in a realm that's going to be more susceptible to latching on to this whole transgender identification change?
Yeah, I mean, like I say at this point, pretty much everything. It is everywhere, right? I mean, everywhere you turn. First of all, I was just on Facebook, and one of my friends just said, I wish I could sign up to some activity that I enjoy without having to give my pronouns first. Yeah. I mean, it's literally everywhere. Yeah. So, I mean, we think, oh, no big deal, that's just a pronoun, but actually it is a big deal. This is a way to push all of us to compel our speech and to indoctrinate all of us that this is the way, and scary stuff. It's, I mean, it's in cartoons. I saw like a Scooby-Doo episode where like Velma had, did you see that? Where, yes. Like they said she was a lesbian, and then they said she was, I think it's Velma. I don't know if I'm getting the right name.
Yeah.
The one with the shorter hair?
Yeah, Velma. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Daphne's the redhead.
Right, Daphne. I don't know if I was mixing them up. And then they had all the flags pop up behind her, including a trans flag. You know, for little kids. They have the Blue's Clues has a whole thing where they have all the trans people. Nickelodeon, like the Cartoon Network, they had a whole like marching parade with all the trans people. And if you look close at the characters, some of them are trans. There's even this, it's strange choice of character, but a beaver that has scars, like mastectomy scars. If you look close, it is. I mean, it is just penetrating everywhere. So it's in media. It's in the workplace. Obviously, people have to have these trainings, these diversity trainings, and this is a part of them.
Right.
It's in all the movies. It's hard to find a TV show where it's not being pushed on you, even on adults. And then, of course, the schools. It's all over the schools. Probably any child that's in any public school, even not in the blue states, have had to give their pronoun in one point or another. Certain states are pushing it harder than others, certain school classrooms, but it's everywhere.
I saw a really frightening article yesterday about Chicago school districts and the amount of abuse that occurred within the school system, from rapings of teachers raping children, sexual abuse, bathroom incidences, just so much. I can't remember. I wish I would have pulled that up so I could have spoke specifically to it. But it was really frightening to see the statistics around the increase in abuse upon children in the school districts of Chicago just over the year of 2022. It was like, whoa, how is this even possible?
Yeah, that's what's so scary about this. I feel like this is priming kids not just to become trans, but to be victims of some other kind of sexual abuse, assault. Grooming is now overused of a word, but grooming, to be sexually trafficked, or just because children are being taught to not trust their own instincts anymore. If they're being taught this is something that you know is a thing, but you're now taught to override what you know is truth and have to pretend it's not truth. So then when something actually dangerous, like in their gut feels this is wrong, happens, they're taught now to override what's dangerous. And so I think that's what's making children more vulnerable to becoming victims. And of course, you're putting people who are predators or allowing predators to be in vulnerable spaces. That obviously is going to open up the window for more abuse. Right.
And why? Like, why do we what's the purpose? Why are we doing all of this? Why is it happening? I have my own opinions.
I mean, there's so many scary agendas that you could go into, right? There's so many rabbit holes. I mean, I think the biggest one, for one, is money, right? Yeah. In terms of all the big pharma stuff. Yes. And getting people hooked on hormones and
keep going.
The puberty blockers, all these things that are going to make someone a lifelong patient. In the best scenario, they're still going to be a lifelong patient. And in most scenarios, they're going to have other chronic issues that are going to pop up from this, like chronic pain, bone issues, blood clots, cancer, problems with their reproductive system. I mean, obviously most of them are going to become sterile if they stay on this. Right. So, and then there's the fertility business that people don't think about. So now we're sterilizing all these children, and then they may or may not change their minds. I don't know, but regardless, they might want children in the future. So now there's this whole business where they can do surrogacy or, farm babies in some shape or form for people who can't have babies on their own. I'm not even going to get into this, but I know people really believe strongly that there is an agenda to depopulate our world. And I mean, that's definitely a possibility. To me, it's just too dark to even go there with that. But then there's this weird, and I don't know, I mean, obviously the nefarious people it's coming from, but it's weird that I think the people who don't recognize this are going on with this, but there's an agenda, I think, to normalize pedophilia. And there's an agenda, and I talked about this with Busy on her podcast, to get people okay with transhumanism, more of this like meta universe stuff.
And in my opinion, I feel that that's where this is going. That's the intention behind all of this. And it does play into population control, and it plays into, genetically modifying the perfect obedient human, right? The transhuman. Who will serve the purpose of, in my opinion, the 1%, the elite, however we want to say it. But it's interesting because you were talking about how, the medications, the medical procedures, the profit that goes along with this. And yesterday I believe it was American Medical Association released a statement around childhood obesity, overweight and obesity, and that they're pushing now medication and surgeries as the solution for children. And so as a nutrition professional, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
I saw that stuff. Yeah.
No. This
so gross.
But again, it feeds into this idea of, well, we can just modify it using medications and surgeries to get it the way we want. And it's a way of really taking and compartmentalizing the human into this machine that we are not. Mm-hmm. Everything is intercorrelated. And so we have a mind, we have a body, and we have a spirit and soul. And in my opinion, with all of these genetic modifications, they are impacting our DNA and the expression. And we may not be seeing the results of that right now, but we'll see the full impact of it 3 generations from now, because everything we're doing right now within our own bodies and in our environment will be impacting the next 3 generations without a doubt.
For sure. And that's why I'm hoping as more people step up, and I was together with a lot of people fighting this, and we were talking about this, that basically we have 2 options. To land in what you're describing is this dystopian nightmare where humankind is basically going to destroy itself.
Right.
Or people are going to recognize that this is really, it's not the inclusivity and kindness that it's been marketed as. And people are going to step up and stop being afraid. And so we can save our children and the future generations. So
do you think there's time? Do we have time? Or is it too far gone?
I hope so. I got to be honest. I almost didn't want to do this interview because I didn't want to be so negative. Yeah. Because yesterday I had a hard time. Yeah. When I saw the kids so bought in, and there were several, and they were all girls in this case, again, yelling at us, "I'm trans and you don't care about me." And none of them look like they were medicalized yet. They're just girls, look like girls. Right. But just watching them just yell at me like that. I've been in high schools for so many years, since 1997. It's never been like that. And I've worked with the most severely mentally ill people. It has never been like that. Society has never been like this. Right. And I just really feel like that the lockdowns and COVID, while this was brewing before that. Yeah. But the lockdowns and the COVID have really broken people in a way that I just none of us have ever seen before. And seeing the kids act like that was really difficult, I'll just say.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, we can talk about the trauma of the pandemic and how it has impacted children. I know in my own line of work, the increase in eating disorders amongst adolescent children since 2020 has skyrocketed. They don't have enough beds and facilities to address the adolescent need, which
they didn't even before.
They didn't before, but we didn't have nearly the monumental amount of children who are suffering right now. It's bad. I mean, it's really, really bad. It breaks my heart because, like yourself, this is the world we're exposed to on a daily basis and interacting and trying to support. And it can be very heartbreaking to see how broken these systems are and how advantage they are taking of people for the means of profit. It just absolutely breaks my heart. When I, go to facilities and I'm having conversations with individuals and they're like, my whole life, I've never been on meds, and now all of a sudden I'm on all of these meds and I don't feel like myself, and I'm telling the staff and I'm telling the doctors that something isn't right. And then they're in return addressed with, well, listen, either you take these medications or you don't get to stay here. You don't get to address the trauma. You don't get to build the resilience with, the mental skills and the ability to process the past traumas. If you don't comply and take the med, we don't get to give you those services. And so it's really heartbreaking to see the pickle that individuals are in, because they're being forced into a situation in order to financially have their stay provided for, covered through insurance. They have to go through all of the hoops. And it's heartbreaking.
It's awful. And it wasn't like that before, because I've worked with the populations. It wasn't like that.
Right.
I mean, I got to be honest. There was a heavily encouragement. There was a lot of encouragement, but it wasn't forced.
Right.
And usually it was heavily encouraged when it was more obvious that it was a really organic type issue. Someone with a psychotic disorder where when they're not on their meds, they're really doing something dangerous to themselves or others, right? That was the times, or people with bipolar type 1 who were arrested several times because, they ended up streaking or doing something really out of control because of their manic episodes. And so we needed to figure out what was the medications. But also they worked, first of all, treatment was not as rushed, and they worked with the patient the best they could to find the right mix or find the right balance, right? And talk to them about it and not force them. But now it's like, it's being used on people that don't have that, I guess, more obvious organic issue that if they were treated, if the issues in their life were treated, that they would not need the medication. I mean, even myself, so I have, like I said earlier, I have chronic pain. It took 2 years for doctors to even believe me what was happening because it didn't show up on a scan. And what did they do on my first appointment? They gave me antidepressants. My primary doctor did. It didn't help me, but I was crying in her office because I was scared and didn't know what was happening with my body. And so she thought I was depressed and anxious, instead of actually addressing the fact that I had a rare disorder that was compressing my nerves and giving me severe pain. So that's how our medical system is working now.
Oh, I know. I mean, unfortunately, I'm all too aware. Most people, however, are not. And so, in my opinion, part of my job is to help and, educate others so that they can advocate for themselves. So bring that awareness, let them know what their options are, and then allow them to discern for themselves what's in their best interest once all of the information is put onto the table. The other day, my husband and I were watching a TV show, and we had to download a free app, right, to watch the show. And I was struggling. I was getting triggered. I was like, just not okay for the 46 minutes of this entertainment, because for every 5 minutes of air program, there were 3 minutes of commercials that you had to sit through, and almost every single one of them had some sort of pharmacological agenda.
Yeah.
And it made me sick. I was like, this is absolutely disgusting. And so what I thought was interesting, as my brain is thinking and going through all of this scenario, I'm like, this is not free. You are paying a significant cost to view this, and it comes in the form of brainwashing and programming through the messages that are being shown to you. It's not free. You are being influenced without your conscious awareness into potentially making decisions and choices that really weren't aligned with, your highest self and what you should be doing, which is quite frightening, because not many people have the ability to recognize that. They just are going through the motions. That's a free app, right? No big deal. No, it's not free. That's called consent. When you download that free app and you have to sit through that brainwashing programming, that's consent. That's how they're getting our approval to carry out these nefarious agendas that are working against humanity and society right now. In my opinion.
Sure, it's everywhere, and so we have a lot in common, because that has actually been my mission, is to educate people, specifically parents, on what is appropriate mental health care, and help them understand when. I even wrote a section on medications. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not telling anybody to take them or not take them. What I wrote was things to consider before you take them, to just how you might make a decision, just what are the pros and cons, and what is the severity, and what have you tried first, and things like that. So just questions to think to yourself and to talk to your doctor about, so that you don't just go along, get along. So you actually have some tools to challenge someone that's maybe pressuring you to do something you don't feel comfortable with, and to make an informed decision for yourself.
Well, in my opinion, I know that there is a lot of harassing, guilting, shaming, and gaslighting that occurs around this. And I can speak specifically to the thing that I chose to not get, that I had to, unfortunately, it has really limited my ability to work as a practitioner in facilities, because they receive reimbursements from the federal government, and anyone in the state of California who is working in any kind of clinical facility is mandated to have that thing, so that the places can receive reimbursement from the federal government for the services. And so it's coercion, right? And in my opinion, one of the things back at that time when I was really thinking about this, because my income, I mean, it impacted my professional life significantly, as well as my ability to, earn an income. And here in the state of California, things are not easy right now. Just got my gas bill and it tripled from last month. And I went through and looked to see why it had gotten so expensive. And then I saw all of these fines and fees that they're adding to support all of these programs. And I'm like, I don't know about this. This is interesting. So there's now this big, huge push to eliminate gas, which is insane. Yeah. I'm sure you see that going on.
I saw that,
right now.
But I think they actually got so much backlash that they're backing off the gas stove thing.
I hope so.
There was a joke, I guess, that AOC said that gas stoves make people stupid, and then people made fun of her, and because they showed a picture of her with it, and they're no wonder.
I'm just my thing is, I don't understand people's rationale. How are we using evidence that says this gas is contributing to asthma, but it's okay to stick this thing into your body that we know have a ton of potential negative consequences associated with it?
They just throw things at the wall and hope it sticks and people don't think. That's it.
I'm just it's insane. So what I'm hearing you say is that ultimately you're committed to helping support parents and individuals think critically about the choices that they're making, to have the ability to take the bombardment of information that's being thrown at them and discern that information in a way that resonates with their best interests.
Exactly. And I actually wrote, because I have so much experience, I actually just wrote out kind of what they should expect from a therapist, what is appropriate therapy. And there's so many, it can look all different ways. There isn't one way, because I wrote out a whole section basically on different types of therapy, including art therapy and talk therapy. And I wrote a whole thing on what dialectical behavioral therapy is and what that looks like. Or just asking questions, how to screen for an appropriate therapist, asking them what is their orientation and how they work and how they handle conflict and whether they involve you as a parent or not, because you should be involved. And unfortunately, therapists are not involving parents and how you should be involved, because there is a little nuance to it. And they'll just say, well, no, I need privacy or confidentiality with your child for them to trust me. That's partially true, but it's not 100% true. They still should be involving the parent, meaning they should be talking to the parent, get the parent's side, the point of view. They should be getting the parents' history of the family, because a child's not going to know that stuff. And of course, anybody, they don't tell the whole truth, whether it's intentional or not. They're still not going to tell the whole truth. You need to learn different sides of the story to be able to make a good assessment and understand how to treat this individual. Mm-hmm. So you need to work with the family regardless, even if you're doing individual therapy. So I just talk about all the things that are what you should expect, and not let a therapist intimidate you to say, well, this is the way, because it's not the way they're doing it now, because now the way is quite indoctrinating and involves a lot of social justice culture, a lot of victim mentality. You should never be told, no matter who you are, that you're a victim of some systemic something or other in therapy. That's not therapeutic. Even if you believe it or not. I mean, I don't even want to get into that. I personally don't believe it, but let's just say you do. It's still not therapeutic to talk about it in therapy. Right. So, I mean, how is that therapeutic? Right. And then also, let's not talk about how you're an oppressor or how you need to check your privilege because of the color of your skin. Then none of that's therapeutic, and none of that should be in the therapy room. So just all that stuff is unfortunately bleeding right into therapy. There's been a lot of exposure on how teachers are indoctrinating children in the classroom, which is great. And Liz with TikTok especially has done a lot of exposure on that. And I kind of got on the scene because I was like, well, therapists are doing it too, or mental health professionals are doing it too. And they're, in a way, certain ways, I feel like it's worse because you're dealing with the more vulnerable. So they're easier to manipulate, and you're in a therapeutic relationship. You're supposed to actually trust the person, and they're opening up to their most deepest, darkest secrets. And so how are you supposed to be able to tease that out? Because some kids can be like, yeah, my teacher's wacky, I don't care. But if you're in therapy with someone and you're trusting that person and you're vulnerable to the point where you might be suicidal, you're going to it's going to be harder to fight that with a therapist. And then they're going to lead them to some dangerous things like medicalizing when they're not ready and it's not appropriate.
Yeah, those are some great points. So for the listener who is very concerned and very interested, how do they get their hands on this guide you have created to help them navigate the whole mental health space and getting appropriate therapy for their children? And the reason I ask is because I know firsthand that right now, trying to receive any kind of mental health support in itself is a real challenge right now. So you combine that with not knowing where to even look, where to get started, it can be overwhelming for most parents, and they'll just kind of put it off onto the burner saying, oh, I'll get to that later. And they just keep pushing it until sometimes it's too late for intervention at that point. So
yeah, it's really challenging, and that's the truth. It's difficult. And my guide, unfortunately, doesn't have a whole list of trusted therapists. A lot of people just want a name, and I can't give you a name. What I can do is give you a way to screen people, and that takes a lot of work, unfortunately.
So I love you, and I admire you for making it that way, okay? Because ultimately, we do have to do our own research.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we don't invest ourselves into the process. And we're just blindly, oh, but they said Dr. So-and-so is a good, great. But what happens when that doctor no longer is in practice, or some, unfortunate circumstances arises and they move to a different state or something? Then what? Yeah. So we really have to empower people and help them build the toolbox to be able to navigate this plane on their own. And while doing so, they're also passing those skills on to their children and teaching their children how to do the same for themselves and future generations that come. And in my opinion, that is something we have lost all connection with across the board in every possible era that pertains to our basic human needs.
It's true. A lot of what I say is modeling is one of the biggest things when I go into the suggestions of different things. But anyway, to find me, it is www.thetruthfultherapist.org. That's my website, and it's $5 a month just to be a part of this program. And I have 11 lessons on there, plus some short essays, and I'm constantly adding things. I'm I'm actually currently writing a lesson on social media and mental health. And I'm writing about the harms of social media. So that's kind of just like a book report on that. But then the piece that's, I think, different, that's going to stand out from what you'll find, is I'm writing what a therapist might ask you to address the issues of social media as a parent. So, for example, what gets in the way? Because we all know, set limits, right? Like, that's the obvious answer, set limits or take the phone away. That's not always so easy. We know that. So, but it's difficult for parents for different reasons. It might be about their history of their parents being too strict with them, or it might be about them wanting their child to like them or being afraid of the temper tantrums that they've had. Or, I mean, it could be a whole host of things. But those are the things that a therapist should be exploring with you. And what is getting in the way of being able to set these limits that you want to set, if that's what you want to do. So I'm basically, in a way, saying what would a good therapist do with you to address some of these issues is what I'm writing about currently. So that's on thetruthfultherapist.org.
Okay.
I'm active on Instagram as the .truthfultherapist. I'm on Twitter as redpilled LCSW. Totally different.
Love that.
So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, LCSW.
Okay.
Those are the main places to find me. I have a YouTube, which is The Truthful Therapist, but I'm not that active on there, but I have a lot of my
Well, it's hard.
Instagram
it's hard for The Truthful Therapist and Heather Barbieri to be honest on YouTube due to the insanity around censorship. Anytime I upload anything and get the message within 30 seconds saying that it has been removed for violating policy, I get super excited. I'm like, woo, there we go. We talking truth today. Moving it over to Rumble.
That's how you know you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the problem, all the censorship. Yeah. We're fighting. We're fighting hard.
Yeah, I think it's the fear, it's the cancel culture, it's being criticized and judged. I know, as a parent, when I went through my divorce, my children were 8 and 13 at that time, which were really critical ages for them in their development. And I relaxed a lot of my parental strategies because I was being controlled through fear of losing custody of my children to my ex-husband. And this manipulated a lot of the outcomes that were occurring around my parenting choices. And if there's anything I could do and go back in time, I would have stuck to my guns. I would have continued doing the parenting I had always done up to that point, despite the fear and the threats that were occurring legally in my world. I would have said, I don't care, and I've actually had my daughters on the podcast, and we've actually had conversations around the divorce, their perception of what they experienced versus what my perception of the experience was. And it's just really interesting to have those conversations and see the different perspectives, and then also get the validation from them. Like, we wished you would have stuck
That's
to your
what I was
guns.
about to ask you. I was wondering about that because that's the thing. Kids want structure.
They do.
So the with the trans and just in general, there's this cultural push to say we trust kids or let kids follow. Let's follow the kids' lead.
Right?
No. They're children. There are not many adults, and they want adults to lead them. I mean, adults want to be led. That's why they're following the government, for Christ's sake. So. Let's look at what
some of us, not all of us.
I know, but I mean, that's human nature. And so, I mean, children are looking for an adult, a trusted adult, which you are as the parent, to guide them and to tell them what is right and what is wrong and what is truth. And so we need to do that for our children. They need that and they want that. And they can't articulate that when they're young, but when they get older, like it sounds like your children just did, they'll tell you, I wish you were a little stricter so that you knew what was right, Mom. Why didn't you do it?
It was that manipulation and fear, honestly.
But it's hard.
And it really is. And again, if there was anything I could go back in time and do, I would have definitely undone that and stuck to my guns out of, just benefit for my children. So,
yeah, I mean, you had a lot going on, but if you had a good therapist at the time, they might have explored with you what was going on. What are the challenges here?
right.
And actually, that was one of the questions too: is your spouse on your side with you or working together with you?
Gosh.
Because
No.
that's another piece, right?
Right.
What's happening
Yeah.
in the family? What are the dynamics? So there's so many dynamics, and this whole like online, like just read a paragraph about something and you think you're going to get the answers of what to do, and people DM me like, how do I handle this thing, and they want me to respond in like a paragraph in a DM. It's like, no, you need to talk to somebody and explore what's going on with you, because it's everyone's different and it's deep,
right.
and there's a lot of variables here.
Absolutely. Well, this has really been an enlightening and enjoyable conversation. I know earlier you stated you were a little reluctant to having this interview because of the negativity that surrounds it. But I honestly believe that we are going to leave the audience with some positivity and some direction in which they can empower themselves to take control and do their part to support humanity and protect the children. So give me your 3 best tips for those listening on what they can do to empower themselves and drop out this narrative and agenda that isn't serving the best, the highest and greatest good of humanity.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I guess think about what's stopping you. If you're afraid, think about what is stopping you, and think about what's maybe real in terms of cancel culture and what is imagined. Mm-hmm. And at the very least, start small. So I understand people have livelihoods. I am in this really lucky, unique position where I can't work full time due to a disability. And that's why I've been emboldened to speak out. So I don't sort of judge people for having to take care of their families and all that. But there's other ways you can still do things. You can still show up to rallies, protests. You can support other people who are doing this kind of work. You can talk to friends and family. If you're just afraid of people rejecting you, that's maybe something to work through. Rejecting you for talking about what you believe in is that's, I think, something to work out.
Yeah. Great tip. That's fabulous. Well, Pamela, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise and your personal experience navigating this whole paradigm that has occurred in the mental health world over a very short period.
It's really shot up, huh?
It's crazy. It's almost like I don't understand when I went to bed and woke up on a different timeline that accelerated this whole narrative. I'm like, how did that happen so quick? But here we are. And you and I are coming together to share our beliefs and our knowledge and expertise to help empower others to, use discernment, make choices and interests that are in the best interest of you and your family, despite how others are viewing that. That's all that truly matters.
Yeah, and I want to say one more thing. I want people to remember that courage is contagious.
Ooh, I love that.
People have told me that they've spoken out because they hear me speak out. And now you and I have connected. I've connected with plenty of other people. You're not alone. And you're going to find the people that believe in truth.
Pamela, thank you so much for your bravery, your courage, your persistence to go against the grain and not be manipulated out of fear and cancel culture to speak your truth. I truly believe in your mission. I support you on all levels. If there's ever anything I can do, please do not hesitate to reach out. Truly an honor to have you here today to share this with the audience.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me, and you helped me feel more positive again. So that's really good. So
Yay!
We just influence each other. That's the thing, right? We're all influencing each other in a positive way, and we've got to keep that momentum going.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you again. Thank you for the opportunity to influence and share that, optimism in a positive way. I do believe strongly that we have the power to get out of this, but it's going to take some courage to do so. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You are awesome, my friend. Let me stop this. Thanks for listening to the Think Yourself Healthy podcast. Do me a favor, and if you loved this episode, please go leave a review. Reviews help make sure that this content reaches more people so that we can continue to heal as a collective. Remember to take a screenshot that you're listening and tag us on Instagram at Heather Barbieri RDN for a 15% discount on the Retrain Your Brain program. See you next time.